So I talked on a recent episode of Power Report how I am going to continue hammering on the fact that there are people who call themselves leftists, such as Kyle Kulinski, who I generally consider one of my friends, but that is friendship is being tested more and more by the day. That these people are giving pseudo right-wingers a pass for their bigotry by cherry-picking instances in which they are amenable to the left, to the detriment of the fact that more often than not, they are counterintuitive to leftist priorities. So much so that it is proving to be a danger to people on the left's lives. So that sounds very hyperbolic. That sounds very intense. And I brought this up during the instance where a bunch of racial statements came up of previously racist statements that Joe Rogan said, and Kyle Kulinski saying, listen, Joe Rogan's not a racist, Joe Rogan's not this horrible guy, I talked to Joe Rogan once about this issue and that issue and the other issue, and not even that many issues, he talked about like 1 or 2 issues max, and Kyle said, listen, Joe Rogan can be changed, his mind can be changed, he is a friend of the left, he listens to right-wingers, and that's totally fine, but ultimately he's an ally. Crystal Ball, who is Kyle Kulinski's girlfriend, which is amazing to me, this says that if there's anyone you could listen to and reason with, it's Joe Rogan, which is ridiculous. But nevertheless, there is a trend that I'm pointing out here, and I'm glad I'm highlighting because other people are seeing. I've gotten a ton of great comments and a ton of people who are other leftist creators who have pointed this out. That Kyle Kulinski just routinely cherry picks, as I'm saying, he cherry picks good moments from Joe Rogan, only to ignore the extreme harm he's doing in the long run. And so here's a clip he did very recently about Joe Rogan dismantling and laughing at an anti-gay guest, basically. It's supposed to show here how Joe Rogan is really adept at having someone on his show and challenging them on their perspectives in a polite way, but in a way that ultimately helps them get to the right side of the issues here. And it's supposed to be on gay marriage, so this is billed by Kyle Kulinski as being promising. And look, Joe Rogan is aware on LGBTQ issues. He's ultimately doing good in convincing people of what's right or not. So let me get into the relevant part of the clip here that's played, and then we'll talk about it a little bit, and then go into Kyle Kulinski's analysis and why it is very short-sighted.
So you think that if someone's gay, if they have a gay relationship, no kids?
No kids.
But what about if they adopt kids?
They shouldn't have kids. It's not, you're not in a space for children.
But if they want to adopt kids,
you want to fuck somebody up. You want to put somebody in a position to be fucked up. It's like getting a dog, but not having no fucking place for the dog to be.
A kid who gets adopted by gay parents, you feel like automatically they're going to get fucked up?
They're going to be fucked up automatically.
Really? You don't think that they can? I have a neighbor in California, and they had a surrogate raise their kid. They're 2 gay guys, and they mixed their sperm up, so they didn't know whose it was. And they hired a lady to get pregnant, and they shot it in there. And the first lady wanted to keep the baby. She's like, "Fuck it, I'm keeping the baby." And they had to let her keep the baby because it was inside of her body. She grew it, and she was so attached to the baby that by the time it was born, she did not want to give up the baby.
Exactly.
And then they hired another one, and then the second one gave up the baby. And the kid, I watched him grow up. He was my neighbor for probably 8 years, somewhere around there. I was friends with the gay couple, friends with the kid. Kid seemed fine. He seemed normal. Come by the house on a skateboard, hang out. He seemed like a normal kid. Hung out with my kid. He seemed okay to me. You don't think that's possible? You have a look on your face like there's no fucking way. Look at the look on your face.
Okay. This guy is asserting that it would be difficult to explain to a kid how gay people work, which is really funny. More on that later. And B, that if you have a kid of gay parents, that kid's automatically going to be messed up. Never mind that, the vast majority of relationships still that are going on right now are with like straight couples, and you know, a lot of people have stories of their parents being less than great to them, of broken households, of divorces, and these couples are straight. So there are so many studies that say that gay kids actually end up in more stable situations and better households, things like that. And if parents are adopting, for example, imagine how much better that is than being in an adoption situation where a lot of those houses for adoption are not really good situations, or situations that will be stable and conducive to growth or upward mobility for those orphans, right? So there's so many ways this is wrong. And you can see how Joe Rogan sort of like uses his like anecdata, his, hey bro, listen, I had an experience one time and therefore I think I'm really right kind of mode of thinking. And in this way it works because when you're communicating to that kind of person, you know, bro to bro in that really kind of sense, it's a little bit disarming there. But I think Kyle, in cherry picking this moment, gives a little bit too much credit to what Rogan is doing here. And you can kind of see it from his reaction because like he's very elated from how this goes. Let me just play this reaction really fast.
Okay.
Wow. Wow, holy shit. So I think Joe handled that well. He gave the counter argument, and then he was like, he wasn't laughing with him, because dude wasn't laughing. He was sort of laughing at him for his ridiculous and bigoted position on this. So let's break this down.
Yeah, let's go Joe, who is taking on the bigot here. It's so insane. So the video goes on to like sort of just go overly into detail with like what is happening there, mentioning like a lot of the things I just mentioned with the statistics that go against being like anti-gay in this way. But what does this video serve to do ultimately? It serves to go to Kyle Kulinski and his almost 1 million followers who think of themselves as left of center, or believing in, you know, free speech absolutism, being anti-war, but also otherwise broadly leftist politics. And the counterpoint to all of this is that the person he's defending, Joe Rogan, is one of the biggest transphobes in the media today. And so to do an entire video about, look at how good Joe Rogan is at addressing an anti-gay bigot, and not talk about the treasure, like, not treasure trove, because again, that's a bad analogy, but to not talk about the huge backlog of anti-trans propaganda that Joe Rogan has spread on his show. I mean, the countless and countless, you know, just random conversation stars about, hey bro, what do you think about transgender people in sports? Because I think with some sports is okay, but like, you know, there's differences between a man and a woman. And it's like, you know, it's this contrived thing he talks about with comedians and politicians and people who have like no opinion or like no real like actual informed opinion on it whatsoever. They're just sort of like talking out of their ass, because that's the point of the Joe Rogan podcast, is you get people who are celebrities in their own right to talk out of their ass for 3 hours, and somehow that entertains people. But you have instance upon instance upon instance, it's really like countless and brazen really, of Joe Rogan just being wildly, madly transphobic here. There's one article that was done in Men's Health in July of 2022 talking about Joe Rogan spreading transphobic hate speech. And it basically stems from interviews that Joe Rogan has had with certain people. And, you know, like when you have an interview on the Joe Rogan podcast, that's not just Joe Rogan asking questions and, you know, real back and forth, real dialogue between each other. It's not like Joe Rogan's thoroughly researching all of the guests. He's sort of just like, you know, what would a layperson ask in response to these things? And so what you actually get is these people get a 3-hour platform to speak to Joe Rogan's very gullible audience, including Joe Rogan himself, who has a defaults to agreeing with what his guests say in order to just keep the conversation moving, in order to stay mostly peaceful. So you can basically put any person in front of him and he will agree with them for a period of time. What matters is what actually he sticks with, ideologically speaking. So he had a guest on at one point who wrote the book Irreversible Damage, The Transgender Craze Seducing Our Daughters. And as it's noted in the article, Schreier invalidated the lived experience of trans and non-binary kids and teens, made numerous dangerous, entirely unsound false equivalencies, comparing transitioning among teenagers to historic adolescent phenomena such as eating disorders, self-harm, and the occult, calling this age group the same population that gets involved in cutting, demonic possession, witchcraft, anorexia, and bulimia. She described wanting to transition as a contagion with the potential to infect other children with the same ideas, drawing yet more scientifically baseless parallels with eating disorders. Anorexics, they're always really careful when they put them together. They have to be in hospital wards because we know that it will cause them to spread. Which is all just wild misinformation about a lot of these, a lot of different disorders, mental illnesses. But it's also to kind of create this panic of people who don't even think about this and go, wait a minute. If you're listening to this and you're a cisgender person and you go, I would never want to do that. I can't believe that anyone could be like convinced to want to be trans or to want to be gay. How can anyone be convinced that? You could never do If that's not you, then you're on the right side. In the sense that you understand how flimsy this argument is. Because if you don't feel like you can be convinced to whomever you're attracted to, then that's kind of the point. People learn and adapt to what they're attracted to. And rather than teaching people to repress these things they might be feeling because they only see certain things represented, or they see things represented in media without context, people can have things explained and said, okay, listen, people can be attracted to men and women and people who don't neatly fall in either category, because there's the sexual classification of man and woman, and there's the gender classification of man, woman, non-binary, transgender, all these other different things. And by the way, there's not even the two male-female sex classification, because intersex is a category as well. But these are scientific nuances that, after 1,700 episodes, have not made it on Joe Rogan's podcast yet. But it's okay, because there's a couple instances that Kyle Kulinski can point out in which Joe Rogan has been really nice towards gay people. Lesbians, bisexuals, I don't know. I guess they're like half gay, so it's all right. But, trans people, that's way too much. Again, the countless segments on so many podcasts about, should transgender people be swimmers? Should transgender people be boxers? Should they be allowed to compete in sports with other, men or women? Is it really fair? When these are small numbers of people on the margins, to be an athlete and to be that successful and then to go through the transgender experience, it's absolutely wild. And this talk has consequences. More than half of transgender and non-binary youth seriously considered attempting suicide last year. And these are statistics that are very common in the LGBTQ spaces, and they were really high in the early 2000s and 2010s before marriage equality was legal in America. And Republicans were way more outright with how anti-gay they are. We're getting a resurgence of that right now, which is really sad to see how much things can retract back socially and even in the law, because you're getting these basically don't say gay bills where you're not allowed to talk about marriage equality or anything like that at all in schools up to a certain grade level. And again, they're trying to spin it as, oh, you're indoctrinating kids because y'all are pedophiles, when in reality it's giving kids the vocabulary and understanding, much as they would go see Snow White or Rapunzel and wondering why, oh, there's a man and woman kissing in that. I'm really young. Why is that going on? You can explain the context for, okay, well, adults do this in a love context, and you can keep it age appropriate, but to just say, oh, I don't know what's going on, don't worry about that, then you're going to have these 5-year-olds figure it out for themselves, and it just won't end very well, especially with the internet. So there are so many other instances of Joe Rogan's ugly transphobia that I am just going to start rolling video clips now. I definitely want to shout out the Surfs for their coverage of this as well, and continuing to hit on some of the dumbest things that Joe Rogan is saying on the dumbest misinformation that Joe Rogan has on trans people.
These gender or these hormone blockers, and you're allowing children to make decisions at a very young age that will affect them literally for the rest of their life. And it's not like it's a 100% success rate. There's a lot of kids who go through gender reassignment surgery that are very regretful. There's websites dedicated to it. You can read all these personal accounts. It's that for some of these people that don't transition, that wanted to transition when they were young, they wind up just becoming gay as they get older. And the problem is, I think for some people, it is the right choice. For some people, if you got them on hormone blockers 99%. And then they transition to be a woman, they might 99%. Ultimately be happier. That's real possible. 99. But they might not too. And so when you're in this situation where you're talking about a minor and you use absolutes, like this is where they want to be, this is their true gender, this is what they should do, and then you encourage them and you lead them along.
If it was 70%, I'd still be advocating for it. I would be like, over 70% of people who do this don't regret it, and it improves their lives. It dramatically reduces suicide rates amongst trans youth. This is a net benefit. I would still be giving that as a response. It's fucking 99. It's over 99. Like, holy shit. Like, where else do you have these kind of talking points where you're like, I mean, there's a less than 1% occurrence of this, so I think we need to focus on this as being a two-sided argument.
And that's really well put there. It's just like, once you put any of Joe Rogan's main talking point bugaboos under even the slightest amount of scrutiny, it doesn't hold up. When you actually bring some facts in there, when you have someone else besides Jamie Google it and look it up, his tepid producer who, listen, he doesn't have journalism or news credentials, but Jamie's presented, the producer of Rogan, who like Googles things from time to time, is presented as being the voice of reason. Oh, they'll Google it, and this guy will just search and click on the first 2 links or so, and that'll work out. There's no actual literacy or research. I have another clip of Rogan here, where he again continually belittles the trans experience, and the audio is a little bit iffy here, but you'll hopefully get the gist of what's being said.
Some women wish they were men. They feel like they should have been a man. You know, there's always been that. Like, it's not fake, right? There really are people that have these thoughts. The 100%. Problem is it becomes a protected subject, and then you get praised for transferring your gender, for changing your gender. Correct. And then it gets exciting for people to talk about, and then you get chastised for even discussing it in any weird way. And then people who were marginalized for being like genuinely dumb people, if they transfer over and become another gender, then they get praised. Like, there's been a lot of people that were like idiots, but then they become trans, and now all of a sudden we think they're amazing.
So there he goes. Like, they're people who are dumb, or they're idiots, or they're stupid. There's some issue that is making them want to transition. They're broken as people, and that's making them want to transition. That's the guy Kyle Kulinski says is reasonable. That's the guy Kyle Kulinski says is good at convincing bigots that people of the queer community are okay. The guy who says trans people are broken in the brain is the guy that Kyle Kulinski wants people on the left to truthfully believe is an ally. This goes back to my original point, that if Kyle Kulinski is making these takes when we obviously see these things, I have to seriously question my one-time friend Kyle Kulinski's ability to be a realistic political prognosticator. Is he telling the truth when he's doing his political analysis, or does he have an agenda that is about chasing his next 1 million subscribers, getting his next Rogan appearance? What is this really about? Because it's really about protecting the left and what it's doing. This isn't helping. And I could go on. There's the hat tip that there's a hat tip that Joe Rogan did to Steven Crowder, who's done a number of transphobic bits. There's the fact that he defended the God hates the F slur, play on words reference that Steven Crowder was using. Like, Joe Rogan has shown he is perfectly ready and willing to deal within transphobia, to build his audience, and make a point or make his stance. And Kyle Kulinski goes, no, look at it. Even as all these bills are passing, where it's illegal to even acknowledge that trans people are existing, at a time when trans people are doing self-harm at higher and higher rates, when they're facing more and more violence, Joe Rogan is actually an ally. The worst part about all of this is that Kyle Kulinski brags about the ability to change Joe Rogan's mind. But I don't know if Kyle has it in him. I don't know if Kyle honestly has... I don't know what Kyle's stance on trans people is. I hope it's good, but I don't know if it's informed enough to be able to inform Joe Rogan. Because the issue with Joe Rogan is he's a person who is constantly listening to a bad game of telephone with his political opinions. And occasionally, someone on the phone will be Cornel West, or maybe even Kyle Kulinski, or someone on the left who's somewhat smart on these things, but most of the time he shuns those out and listens to his right-wing drinking buddies. Kyle is simply not equipped to address these big picture issues, especially when they touch things that are beyond the experiences of the American white male lifestyle. And it's very clear in videos I've mentioned before, and including this of Kyle. So I DM'd Kyle about this blind spot the last time I did a segment on this, and I've sent tweets about it, and I've gotten a ton of responses about it. It's currently my pinned tweet. I've seen people reach out to me I've never heard from before. I've gotten fellow leftist content creators who I will continue to work with and start working with and continue making a fuss about this, who are saying, yes, I agree with you, what's going on, that Kyle's asleep at the wheel. I promise you, and as I did, and I will reiterate as I did in the other video, I will become unignorable on this issue. And I'm also willing to talk to him on his show, or to him come on my show, or however he wants to do this, to work out how dangerous what he is missing is really starting to get for the left. So yeah, if any other leftists want to help me boost this issue, I'll go on your shows as well. Just get in touch. But I want this to be a productive experience. I want to show this can be a productive experience. And we can do this in a way that is productive and not ugly. Or we can do this in a way that I know will get results, but it'll end up kind of ugly. And I don't want to do that. But I will become unignorable.